Nanku Mbongo, umbuyisa, ungaleza, undima, usondisa, umvemnyama, ozalwa pha komanzana, kokhumalo, komtungwa, komdletje. Dithi ngalo mazwi, welcome to the show, State of the Arts with Thami Mbongo. Brought to you by the Creative Passport, which is a new established company by 5 practitioners. In this show, we cover what is happening at the cultural and creative industry in South Africa. We invite guests to talk about their work, and in some episodes, I personally share my views and thoughts on some of the burning issues that are happening in the cultural and creative industry in South Africa. And we would like to encourage those who have not yet subscribed to our YouTube channel to please do so. Please do subscribe. And also you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram with the same name, State of the Art with Thami. As you know, we are busy currently, and in some of the episodes, we've invited a couple of political parties to come and speak to us. So, why should the cultural and creative industry practitioners vote for your party? But today, we are having a totally different show. We are speaking Liliesleaf, and we have as our guest the Liliesleaf Trust CEO and founder, Mr. Nicholas Wolpe. Liliesleaf Farm in Sandton has a special place in South African history. It is where Nelson Mandela and his comrades plotted the overthrow of the apartheid state back in the 1960s. So, Umkhonto, for those who don't know, Liliesleaf is one of South Africa's most national heritage sites. Between 1961 and 1963, Liliesleaf served as a secret headquarters and nerve center of the African National Congress, SACP, Umkhonto, Sizwe, and the Congress Alliance. On 11 July 1963, the police, acting on a tip-off, raided Liliesleaf and arrested the core leadership of the underground liberation movement. Following the raid, 10 people were put on trial to face charges of 193 counts of sabotage against the state. Babungayazi lonto history as South Africa. Nelson Mandela, who was already serving a prison sentence at the time of the raid, became accused number 1. With him in the dock were Walter Sisulu, Dennis Goldberg, Gavin Mbeki, Atmat Katrata, Lionel Rusty Bernstein, Raymond Mhlaba, James Kanto, Elias Matsoleti, and Andre Mlangini. Ubangabe yakhumbula la trial ye-Revonia trial sithetha ngabo boyi-12. Kanto and Bernstein were acquitted, but the other 8 were found guilty and sentenced to life in prison. The raid on Liliesleaf and the subsequently imprisonment of the leaders of the struggle dealt a hammer blow to the liberation movement and internal resistance to apartheid. But Babut, as the artist, we really need to know about this history so that today, when we are telling the story, we tell the story of what happened in South Africa. Today, Liliesleaf is a home to extraordinary exhibition that tells the story of the journey to democracy in South Africa. Liliesleaf is more than just a national heritage site. It is also a site of memory that keeps the history of our liberation alive. Abantu abaninzi bayazazi ezinye indawo ze-museum, but bambalwa abayaziyo iLiliesleaf. So today we are talking about Liliesleaf. Liliesleaf Farm Museum CEO Nicholas Wolpe made the announcement of the closure to what was once a heaven for the famous Revonia Trial 12. During the announcement, Wolpe said the farm has not been able to pay employees for several months now, and it hasn't paid creditors. You might be asking, Oguti, what is the Department of Sports, Arts and Culture is saying about this? We understand. They've responded saying for 13 years, the heritage site has received over 70 million in funding. So, but for 13 years, Bona, as the Department of Sports, Arts and Culture, they have been funding Liliesleaf. But anyway, we've got our guest today, you understand, to unpack some of these things and get to the bottom of this. Welcome to the State of the Art with Thami Mbongo, Mr. Nicholas Wolpe. How are you doing today, sir?
Good morning, Thami. Thank you very much for having me on your show. And good morning to your listeners. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you very much. Maybe let us take it from the start. Just give us a little bit of a history of Liliesleaf Farm Museum and your involvement in it.
Your introduction was excellent. You set the scene very well, so I don't want to repeat myself, but I think it's important for your listeners to recognize that Liliesleaf didn't fall from the sky. It must be seen within a broader political context, which unfolded and which redefined our liberation struggle. And I'm referring specifically to Sharpeville, which is probably the most defining moment in our struggle. It was where 69 innocent people, mainly women and children, were shot in the back. And that incident, which reverberated around the world, which caused a storm, which led to demonstrations and uprising in South Africa, propelled and shifted the focus of the struggle away from solely passive resistance to a combination of passive resistance and armed struggle. And the issue of armed struggle was something that had been debated from the mid-40s throughout the 50s. Though there was not opposition, there was reluctance to move away from solely passive resistance. But Sharpeville redefined it and gave the impetus for the movement to take up arms, because it recognized that passive resistance was no longer the viable policy and approach. And so, following Sharpeville, following the banning of the ANC and the PAC, a decision was taken by both the ANC and the Communist Party to move to armed struggle. And within that context, within the banning of the ANC, Liliesleaf was purchased. What do I mean by that? That the safe houses which had been used by the Communist Party, because they had been banned in 1950 for where the leadership could meet, was now being used by leaders of the ANC who had been banned and who'd gone underground. So it became increasingly difficult for the Communist Party to meet. Therefore, it was decided that they needed to find a safe place, a safe house to meet. Graham Fisher, who was the chairman of the Communist Party, and also the QC for the Rivonia trialists, he was the barrister for the Rivonia trialists, instructed Ahmed Kathadra and Michael Harmel. And it was Michael Harmel who found Liliesleaf. Liliesleaf was purchased in August of 1961. And interestingly, this year, it's the 60th anniversary of its purchase. So August marked the 60th anniversary of its purchase. And in fact, this month marks the 60th anniversary of when Nelson moved on to Liliesleaf as David Montemayor, the gardener in the Blue Oval. December will mark 3 other milestones. It will be the 60th anniversary of when the Goldbrights moved in. Arthur and Hazel left 2 children fronted as the white owners of the property to create that white facade. It will also be the 60th anniversary since Chief Lutuli was awarded, or received, I should say, the Nobel Peace Prize. He was actually awarded it in 1960, but he only received it in 61. And also December will be the 60th anniversary of the formation of MK. And the ANC at its conference in 2002 declared that the birthplace of MK was in fact Liliesleaf. So this is a significant year from the point of view of historical milestones.
And can you tell us what was the reaction, especially for those who were involved in Rivonia trial, when they've heard Wuti? Now we understand that you are going to be creating like a museum for them. What was the reaction like, especially to people like Nelson Mandela and all of them? What was their reaction?
Well, I must be honest, their reaction was lukewarm, because I think there was a sense of, things were, we have a tendency to say things in this country and not follow through. So there was skepticism. Would this actually happen? Or was this merely talk? Would we achieve this? And to highlight it, I'd recall a story which really illustrates what I'm saying. So around 2013, 2014, I was being interviewed by, I cannot remember, a news station. I don't know which news station I was interviewed. But after the interview, the cameraman came up to me and said, "You don't remember me. I was the cameraman when you were being interviewed by," again, I cannot remember the name of the journalist, "in 2003. And he said, "I must apologize to you." So I said, "What for?" He said, when you were walking around, when it was just property, they were, at the time, they were 4 individual properties. And you were saying to the journalist that this is where you would put the resource center, this is where you would build the liberation center, and these buildings would be the historical, are the historical structures in which the exhibits would be placed in. He said to me, "I thought you were talking the biggest load of rubbish. I never thought you would achieve what you set out to achieve." So I think he summed up the skepticism. But over the years, enthusiasm grew. I got immense support from people like Dennis Goldberg, Andrew Mulungeni, Ahmed Kathadra, Arthur Goldright, and those that were alive. And they began to appreciate what we were trying to achieve and what we did achieve. And that's why it's now become the most important site, because it's become the catalyst in many respects for other initiatives, and has been able to support other initiatives in terms of providing valuable information, which we have captured. Because I think, Thami, we've talked about the historical significance of the site, but it's not about just the historical significance of the site. Now, you're going to think I'm completely crazy, but I'm going to talk about a film. And that film is called The King's Speech. I don't know if you've seen it.
Yes.
Now, if you remember, when the king is going to be crowned, Geoffrey Rush is sitting in that famous chair, and he's having a fight with the future king. And the future king eventually says, "I have a voice. I have a right to be heard." For me, that's such a poignant line, because the other aspect of Liliesleaf is to give a voice to the voiceless, to give a voice to those who have a right to be heard, to give a voice to those who have a story to be told, who have been neglected. Because I think one of the important things is in establishing a sense of unity, of addressing the anguish and the trauma of those who suffered at the hands of the brutality of a regime that defined the person, not by the content of their character, but by the color of their skin, that the color of their skin defined their status in society. It's to give them a voice. Yes, they want justice. Yes, they want, somehow the wrongs of the past to be redressed and addressed. But for a lot of them, it's giving them a voice so that they have the right to be heard. For them to be heard goes a long way to establishing and addressing the trauma that they feel. It's a cathartic experience. Why do I say that? We interviewed the surviving farm laborers and their families who were arrested at Liliesleaf. And the daughter of one of them said this is one of the most cathartic experiences for the families, because we had been waiting at the time for 38 years. Or should I say, beg your pardon, for 48 years. So for 48 years, for someone to come and listen to our stories. So that's what Liliesleaf provides as well. It's a platform for people to tell their stories. Whether they feel part of the exhibit or not, it's the fact that they are given an opportunity, that their story has meaning, that their story has relevance. That's why when someone says to us, my story is insignificant, it has no meaning, we say, no, it does. It has meaning and relevance. And then they begin, I think, to realize it does, because it gives them that platform to express what they have wanted to say for how many years it may have been. So Liliesleaf is not just a historical site. It is a place to give the voiceless a voice, and it is a place where people can come and engage and discuss and talk about some of the issues within a context of what this place symbolized. Because Nelson Mandela said on his last visit to Liliesleaf, what made Liliesleaf unique was it was a place of intellectual, ideological, strategic, military discourse and engagement. And we homed in on discourse and engagement.
And I must also share something with you, Mr. Nicholas. The Creative Passport, which is the company that is doing this show, we are about 5 creatives. Funny enough, around July, August, we had a meeting with Mr. Mbongo. We went to Liliesleaf and we took a tour, and we were blown away by the space, because we were having this concept, because one of our directors is a visual art, the other one is a site-specific performer director, and we wanted to develop this concept of using that space. And we had this meeting, it was July or August, and then boom, boom, in the media, we are reading about, hey, Liliesleaf is closing, and we were so shocked. So to us, as Creative Passport, it really also hit home. But before we cover some of the issues, I was interested when I was in the venue to find out, Tukuti, how were you able to sustain that space? Besides, I'm not sure whether you only receive funding from DSEC or others, but how was the challenge of maintaining that beautiful space? Because it's really beautiful. I've been there personally myself. I've toured it. It's amazing. So how were you able to maintain it?
Thami, thank you very much, firstly, for your kind remarks about Liliesleaf. And it is wonderful to hear what you have said, because that's one of the things that we want to create, a space for people to come and experience and also use it. And before I answer the question, I'd like to just say there's very little difference in many respects between what you do as a creator and what I do at Liliesleaf. It is about harnessing the creativity of what these places mean. And when I use creativity, I'm in no way undermining Liliesleaf, but it's a space that resonates with people. It gives a voice, it tells a story, it has a life of its own. It's how we harness all of that in a creative manner, which tells the story in a way that captures the imagination and of the space. Just like you, when you talk about doing something creative, you want to capture the imagination of your audience. You want them to come with you on that journey to experience. We want to take our visitor on a journey of enlightenment, of discovery. So in many respects, we do the same thing, but from two different kind of components, elements of a broader environment. That's why we mustn't separate this environment. The creative arts, the culture and history are all of one of the same thing. They are different elements to a triangle, for want of a better word. But they all intersect and meet and cross over, because the arts played an important role in our struggle against apartheid, and we mustn't forget that. We mustn't lose sight of that. I'm sorry I deviated for a second, but I believe that is a very important message that this platform needs to put across. The creativity is the entire sector, the integrated. It's an ecosystem that feeds off each other. You know, it's not standing there in isolation. Ipitombi, Mandela, the cultural ensemble that played those important roles. Like, for example, King Kong, the musical. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that musical, King Kong, that was done in '58. Interestingly, just so your audience know, Liliesleaf is linked to the musical King Kong.
Wow.
So you may wonder how and in what way. So the set designer and creative arts designer was one Arthur Goldreich, who lived at Liliesleaf, who fronted as the white owner. So if you find a copy of the original record and go down the credits, you'll see Arthur Goldreich. So we have that link to King Kong. So even King Kong, you know, set the path and established Jonas Gwangwa, Hugh Masekela, and Miriam Makeba. And they became, like people like Dollar Brand and others, a creative, artistic voice against apartheid. So I think we must understand it. We mustn't see it as silos. I think that is an important aspect. Now, coming back to your original question, and my apologies for deviating.
No, this is good. This is good.
Yeah. COVID-19 has shone a spotlight on a systemic problem that our sector faces. And you know it very well. Your friends, your colleagues, we have lived from hand to mouth. That has been our existence. We have struggled to survive. And that has been something that Liliesleaf has faced since its inception. It's been a struggle to secure operational funding. We have on numerous occasions in the past come perilously close to closing our doors. So this is not the first time that we have been perilously close to closing our doors. This time, though, it's different from the others where we have had no option but to close our doors because of also the consequences of COVID-19. This is not a consequence of COVID-19 on its own. It is merely exacerbated a problem that we've all experienced in our space. You've experienced it. I mean, in some instances, it's been a lot worse for you and your fellow artists. Some of them have gone to the point of committing suicide because they haven't been able to put food on the table. You know, that is terrible, to get to a point where someone is willing to take their own life because of desperation, because they are not able to put food on the table, says volumes about our Department of Arts and Culture. Because why should we get to a point where artists have to kill themselves? Because it's the only option they feel that is left to them.
Yeah.
And the same is, in the equivalent, is Liliesleaf closing its doors. But it's only closing its doors indefinitely. It will come back. But it has been a systemic problem that we have battled to raise operational funding over the years to keep the place going. The role of the Department of Arts and Culture should be an enabling environment to support the sector in its totality, not in isolation. And I also believe, Thami, the 5.4 or whatever billion it gets is a measly amount when you think about the overall budget of 3 trillion. I mean, why 5.3 billion? I'm not expecting 20 billion, but we should get at least 10 billion. That department should be an enabling environment that provides the support that is needed to ensure that our sector in its totality flourishes. You know better than anyone else the number of brilliant artists who are leaving this country. Why? Because there's no opportunity for them to practice their art. There is no platform for them to perform. There is no space for them to develop and improve. The creative arts in this country is being strangled, just like the culture and heritage sector. And that's why I want to bring it together. I don't want to isolate and talk about Liliesleaf in isolation, because that is not the point. It's not about one significant historical site. We're just very fortunate that Liliesleaf is a preeminent site which attracts the interest from people like yourself.
Mr. Nicholas, let us now move to some of the quotes that you've said. I want us to unpack some of the things. You said in 2015, Liliesleaf did sign an MOU for a project for 9 million, which we got 8.1 million. That money was not spent on the project. It was spent on operational funding, and we reported to that. We submitted reports and the department rejected them, saying the reports did not speak on the MOU. Can you please elaborate? Because I know when I shared the open letter, which we will talk about later on, some of the people were saying, but if the MOU is saying this, why did you not stick to the agreement of the MOU? Can you please elaborate on that?
Let me reiterate, and I'll state it. We did sign, it was actually an MOA in March of 2015 for a legacy project. We did not use the money for what it was originally stated. However, my trustees were aware of what we were going to use the money for. There had been discussions prior to that with the minister and my chair, and there was a general understanding that money would be used for operational funding. The fact that the department would not give us the money unless we signed the project took us by surprise, because that was never the intention or the original purpose for the funds. So while there was a legal document in place which specified how we had to spend the money, the intention was never to spend the money on what was set out in the MOA. That was the general understanding of all parties concerned. Let me also state for the record, your listeners are absolutely right. MOA is a legal document, and as such, I broke, within the context of that document, I broke the law. But I did not break the law in that sense without the awareness of all parties concerned. And in 2015, Thami, when I submitted the report, the issue is, why did not the department take up the matter then and there? All they said was, we're not going to give you the balance of the money. And that was it. So the issue is, why wait 4.5 years? And back in December 2015, they were very much aware of how the money had been used and what the money had been used on. And that in itself should raise a red flag. All the parties were aware of how the money had been dispersed. It wasn't a secret. It was general knowledge. It was out there. It was transparent. It wasn't as if someone could turn around and say, well, we had no idea that's what he did in 2015. And I think that's also a fundamental point. Again, let me make it quite clear to me. I'm not disputing what some of your listeners have said and what has been said. There also must be an acknowledgement on the other side of the coin that there was general awareness of all parties. Again, to reiterate, this was not done in secret or withheld, or the information of how the funds are being dispersed or withheld. So on that context, it is not as clear cut as one makes it out to be. Parties and stakeholders were all aware of what was going on and what was happening.
Okay, and then my next question, which also comes from some of the comment, will be what is the position of the trustees in all of this? Are they with you on this, or it is divided? Because one of the quotes that you said the trustees were caught off guard. They were not aware. The reason being, I was effectively told not to communicate with them until the forensic audit was completed. Is there any comment on that regard?
That comment still stands. And I have not communicated with the trustees since May 19th. And I've had no communication from them since the 19th of May. The forensic audit has been complete. I am not aware of the content of that forensic audit. The trustees were very much aware, well, two of the trustees, primarily it's a new board, but two of the trustees were very much aware of how the funds were being dispersed back in 2015. It has actually been minuted. It's actually documented. So, Thami, the situation hasn't changed since I made that last statement.
Oh, wow. And then now let's move swiftly to the plea that you've made to the minister. But before we do that, just in case for those our viewers out there who did not read this letter, let me go through it. A plea to Minister, dear Minister Nathi Mthethwa, I hope this message finds you keeping well and safe. I am deeply concerned by your silence and lack of action with regard to providing Liliesleaf with much needed core operational funding. During interviews you give to the media at the beginning of September, following the notification of Liliesleaf intention to close indefinitely due to lack of much needed core operational funding, you purportedly stated that once the forensic audit report instituted by the trustees of the Liliesleaf Trust had been completed and handed over to the trustee, you would proceed to release funds to Liliesleaf. It is now almost 6 weeks since the forensic audit report was handed over to the trustees of the Liliesleaf Trust, and 4 weeks since the trustees purportedly met with you to discuss the findings of the forensic audit report. These following your apparent media remarks, I am surprised and bewildered by your lack of action when it comes to releasing the much needed core operational funds to enable Liliesleaf to reopen. Given as it appears, you have taken no positive, no action or steps to have the funds released, the only inference which can be drawn is your apparent claims made to the media that funds would be released sadly appear to be misleading. Like so many other misleading statements and claims you and your DG have made to the media during your interviews. Like, for example, Liliesleaf is not entitled to receive funding because it's not a cultural institution. With regard to this claim, I yet again would like to reiterate and restate the following. The Cultural Promotion Act gives you, as the minister, the power and the discretion to fund independent institutions like Liliesleaf. Given this, I am surprised you constantly hold the position and statement that you can't fund independent institutions like Liliesleaf, when the Cultural Promotions Act give you the discretionary powers to do so. Since 2002, Liliesleaf has received from your department 61,534,470.85 each, which equates over the past 20 years to, these numbers, I don't want to, 3,076,723.54 per year. Given that Liliesleaf has received this amount from the department, I would indeed be very keen and interested to know under what legislative framework or guidelines the funds were granted and released to Liliesleaf. Minister Mthethwa, I would like to argue and plead with you to uphold your purportedly commitment to give Liliesleaf the much needed core operational funding following the release of the forensic audit report, which will enable Liliesleaf to reopen. My question is, since you wrote this, is there any response from the minister and the department, and what is it that you are hoping to achieve with this letter?
Firstly, before I answer that question, I would like to come back at the outset. You talked about the department saying they've given Liliesleaf 70 million over 13 years. The reality is they haven't given Liliesleaf 70 million over 13 years because Liliesleaf has been in existence close on 20 years. January will be 20 years. So again, for them to say 13 years, they've excluded 7 years. We talk about the entire lifespan of the organization, not the period in which they funded. So that's point number one, we must be very clear. They funded Liliesleaf. They've given funding to Liliesleaf over 20 years. However, there have been periods where they haven't given us funding. So we must break it down, firstly, and understand that the length that this organization has been in existence for, and then take it further and drill down and say, over that 20 years, how many years have they funded Liliesleaf? It gives a completely different picture. Again, the DG, the Deputy Director General, and the Minister keep talking about 70 million. In fact, it's not 70 million. In a letter we received from the Minister back in 2016, it was 70,900,000. So you could, round it up to 71 million. So what's happened to the 1 million? Suddenly now 70 million. So where did the 1 million disappear to? That they purportedly have given Liliesleaf. So you get one figure of 70 million and another figure of 70,960,000. For simplicity, let's round it up to 71. We undertook an audit investigation in 2016. It's done by Grant Thornton, an independent auditing firm. They could only account for 61.5 million. They could only find 61 million coming from the department. So the question is, we have this audit report which talks about the figures that I make reference to in my letter and the amount that they claim to have given Liliesleaf, and there is a discrepancy. 9,400,000. So the department needs to show us that they gave us that 9,400,000 and into which account did they put that money into. And if that's the case, we will acknowledge that the forensic audit that was done independently for us was incorrect. But they have never, despite my pleas, provided us with that information. So that on the flip side, they have never accounted for the supposed 9 million difference or 9.5 million difference. So that's one aspect. Right? It's important because that again is part of the misrepresentation that is presented by the department to the public. Now, coming back, do I expect anything from the response from the department? No, I don't. I don't expect any response. I don't expect anything. I did it because I believed that I needed to do it. You know, accusations, Thami, were made against me during that period in the media. Accusations which were effectively, which are not effective, which are false, misleading, and inaccurate, and border of slanderous. You know, that's important to know. You know, and for example, the MEC for Sports, Arts and Culture said that Liliesleaf hasn't accounted for 10 million rand. I've been pleading with the Premier to explain to me, or to get the MEC to explain what 10 million rand is she referring to. There's been no response. So they gave an inaccurate statement. I don't know what 10 million rand she's referring to. When the media asked me, I said, I don't know what she's referring to. What 10 million rand? You know, so these are some of the issues which have plagued this whole thing. And it's unfortunate because at the end of the day, Liliesleaf suffers. This unique historical site is suffering. The bottom line is we need to find a solution and find it quick to ensure that we are able to reopen Liliesleaf for it to continue the extraordinary work it does. At the end of the day, Thami, that's the most important thing. Be about Liliesleaf, nothing more and nothing less. What can we do to ensure that Liliesleaf remains open for all? Because Liliesleaf ultimately is the storehouse for the unborn child. Yeah. That's what Liliesleaf is. It is our future. Liliesleaf actually, and this is what I call Liliesleaf is our bridge to the past, our link to the present, and our connection to the future. That should be the number one priority. Nothing more, nothing less. At the end of the day, you need to move on. But in order to move on, some of these misleading statements need to be addressed and tackled. But ultimately, it is about preserving Liliesleaf and not just Liliesleaf, our art, culture, and heritage sector in its totality. If I can finish off, there was a guy by the name of Martin Niermund, who was a German Lutheran priest during the Second World War. And he wrote this magnificent poem, and I'll paraphrase it. They came for the socialists, I did nothing. They came for the communists, I did nothing. They came for the gays, I did nothing. They came for me, and there was no one left to speak out for them. And if we turn it around and place it within our current context, we don't stand up now and say something, there will be nothing left to protect and speak out to. There will be no theatre, no performers, no historical site. We will live in a barren society and there will be nothing left to protect. That's the important thing. That is what we need to protect at the end of the day. And we need to have a department that is willing and able to address this and protect it in its totality.
Actually, you've just started to cover which, because my next question, as we are about to wrap, the show is called State of the Arts. I was going to ask you, what is in your personal take, the state of arts and culture and heritage in South Africa and what needs to be done? And you've also covered that. And then I wanted to hear, maybe you will put it in your closing remarks, your take about our Minister Nathi Mthethwa, and the department. Maybe as your closing remarks, you can cover any of the other things that you want to say, and we close this interview. Over to you, your closing remarks.
Thami, I think the important thing is we need to protect our arts, culture, and heritage. We need to protect our indigenous languages, our indigenous knowledge. We need to protect traditions of what makes this country so unique, so spectacular. Recognizes when we take all of this together, it forms the basis of our collective identity. It's one of the things that we suffer from in South Africa, the lack of identity. We do not know who we are and what we're about, which speaks to national interest. Having a national identity then speaks to what our national interest is.
Yeah.
The role of the department is to ensure that we have a social cohesive society, that we speak with one voice, we have a one identity. Within that one identity, we have the various matrix and ecosystems that make up who we are, that talk to that national identity. That is what the department should be doing. They should be protecting those very elements, sectors that speak to what I have just said, that are the source of the Nile, which provide very inputs that lead to creating what we need to be as a country, or should be as a country. So it's not just about protecting our arts, culture, and heritage. It is about protecting it for a specific purpose beyond just looking at it as performing arts, a historical building, an in-the-belly painting. They go beyond that. They speak to who we are as a people. And that is an incredibly important thing to me. That's what this department is also about. First and foremost, we must ensure that it protects the sector, because if it doesn't, the state of our arts, culture, and heritage will have fallen so far there will be nothing left to protect, preserve, and nurture. That's important. Again, I'd like to reiterate that this is not just about Liliesleaf. This is about the sector in its totality. Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming through to the show, and it was nice. As you could have seen, we are also unpacking these things for the next generation to understand this story. The purpose of the show, we want to archive as many interviews as possible so that the next generation can go back and really listen and know what is happening. To everyone that has been watching our show, this is the State of the Arts with Thami, Mbongo, Umbuyisa, Ungaleza, Undima, Usondisa, Umvemnyama, Ozala Manzana, Okumalo, Umtungwa, Omdleke. Thank you very much for tuning us. Don't forget, if you have been subscribed to our channel, please do so and follow us on all our social media platform, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. From me, thank you very much. We are signing out. Salute.
Bye-bye. Thank you.